For my theme text that I focus on examining privilege and power, specifically in regard to my central question, which is how can African American literature that shows racism and discrimination create an awareness of societal privilege in non-marginalized groups? The books that I chose for my text set are From Slave Ship to Freedom Road by Julius Lester, Freedom on the Menu by Carol Boston Weatherford, and Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. From Slave Ship to Freedom Road discusses the horrible and immoral events that took place during the transatlantic slave trade, as well as the treatment of slaves on the southern plantations, and the events that led up to the Civil War. In this text, we clearly see the theme of striving for freedom. Freedom on the Menu is told from the perspective of a younger sister of one of the Greensboro sit-in protesters. In this peaceful protest, college students refused to move from their spot at the lunch counter until they were served. In this text, students are able to see the effects of societal inequalities created by the Jim Crow laws. Brown Girl Dreaming is author Jacqueline Woodson's memoir told through free verse poetry. Through Woodson's depiction of her life, readers have the opportunity of having a first-hand, more contemporary look at discrimination in South Carolina and New York in the 1970s. I specifically chose these texts because they show racism and discrimination of African Americans across the history of our country, beginning in the pre-Civil War era, moving into the Civil Rights Movement, and ending in the 1970s where we see discrimination in Woodson's memoir. These texts all convey the themes of empathy, social justice, equality, and freedom, and are culturally conscious because they are written by insiders of the culture. The first goal of this text set is for students to develop a stronger, more accurate understanding of racism and discrimination faced by African Americans. And the second goal is for students to be able to reflect on that racism and discrimination and understand the societal disadvantage that African Americans face as a result of our country's long history of oppression. Lastly, students will gain a better understanding of the customs, traditions, and values of the African American culture, and from this understanding, they will be able to better combat stereotypes and misconceptions. This text set was created for a 5th or 6th grade class, and a class that is comprised of both African American and white students, with the majority of the students being white, and the timeline for the text set is to be over a 3-week period. In From Slave Ship to Freedom Road, students will begin by activating their background knowledge of slavery in the United States with a KWL chart, and then students will continue to build their background knowledge through a video which discusses the transatlantic slave trade. And during reading, students will discuss big questions like why slaves might have been apprehensive about their freedom once they received it, and why it took so long for slavery to end in our country. After reading, students may choose between researching a person from history who played a significant role in the emancipation of slaves, or research a method of escaping used by slaves in the South, and how the method was developed and whether or not it was effective. In Freedom on the Menu, students will begin with a journal writing where they can reflect on something they are not allowed to do and why they're not allowed to do it. Students will discuss the thoughts and feelings of different characters in the text during reading, and then contrast their journal writing to the types of things that African Americans were unable to do in this text, things like sitting at a lunch counter. After reading, students will either write in a diary entry from the perspective of one of the characters, or use factual information presented in the author's note to write a news article or radio script describing the sit-ins. In Brown Girl Dreamer, we're going to focus on the second poem that she writes in her memoir, which is called Second Daughter, Second Day on Earth. But before reading, we're going to begin by researching and creating a list of African American values and traditions, and take note of where students see these values presented in Woodson's text. During reading, we're going to think about Woodson's civil rights references in her second poem and discuss why she included them in her memoir. And lastly, students will participate in a critical literacy writing activity where they think carefully about the experiences of African Americans within Woodson's civil rights references and compare that to the experiences of white people during the same time in history. Students will then reflect on the societal advantages and disadvantages faced by members of different social groups. This text set connects to many different disciplines, including history, where students can create a timeline of events related to the fight for equal rights of African Americans, or they may develop a table of organizations that fought for equal rights on behalf of African Americans, or analyze the number of slaves in math transported during different years into different continents and reflect on why those numbers were higher or lower during certain years. And there's also a writing connection where students can create a memoir similar to Woodson's, and art, where students may write or create a slogan that a protester might have used during the sit-ins in the civil rights movement, or create a skit reflecting the different perspectives of the characters in some of the texts. Technology will be embedded through students' use of their Chromebooks to compose their writing and research for their research projects. And in reflecting on this text set, I definitely learned the value of using a variety of text to convey similar themes. Using this variety helps to prevent that single default story of a culture, And I also enjoyed finding a common theme woven throughout the text and also creating critical literacy discussions and lessons, because I think that these types of lessons are what really help our students become more empathetic and compassionate people. And the most challenging part was ensuring that the text and the text set not only addressed the essential question, but truly provided students with a diverse and accurate representation of the African American culture.